Hi, thanks for joining me on HR Chalk Talk. I'm Brent Houchin, founder of Houchin Consulting and co-founder of Tech People Resources, also known as TPR. The HR Chalk Talk podcast is here to provide information to those in human resources, those in leadership positions, and those who simply want to know more about HR best practices. Today's subject is millennial. It's not a bad word. And I mean that. It is not a bad word. It should not be considered the latest or most current F word in our vocabulary. I often hear from my clients, even those with larger workforce of millennials, using the term millennial like it's a bad thing. It absolutely makes me cringe because we're basically stereotyping and putting a group of people into a box, and we're not thinking about the individuals themselves. You know, I was at a company some years back, and we did a generational training, and we were all excited with it and thought it was going to be amazing, and we were so thrilled with what we were doing with it and felt really good about it. I had an individual, a gentleman, come to me about 2 days after that training was conducted, and he was a little bit disturbed and distraught and upset, and it was interesting because I got to listen to him and really listen to why it bothered him so much. It absolutely made sense. He sat down and he said, in the training you guys talk about how we, the millennials, need to understand how the Gen Xers and the baby boomers and all the different groups think and act, and that they need to understand us as well. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you're saying so far. And he said, but I don't think the way that all millennials do, or at least the way you all portrayed that all millennials think and act one way. And I sat back and listened some more, and he said, I actually think that I am far more like a baby boomer than I am a millennial. He said, my work ethic and the way that I think and the way that I work is very different than my coworkers who are the exact same age as me. In fact, he said, they annoy me often. I said, so you're, in essence, stereotyping them. And he laughed and he said, I guess I kind of am. He said, I just think that we need to look at people more from an individual standpoint as compared to comparing them to a millennial as this, a Gen Xer as that, a baby boomer as this. And he was spot on. I sat back and I really thought about what he had to say for quite a while. Again, this was some years back, and I'm thankful that I can say I learned from year to year from those around me. And my conversation with him has always sat with me that we should never be looking at individuals or talking about individuals or talking to individuals as if we know exactly who, how, where, what they're supposed to be. That we need to learn about the individual themselves and not perceive their age as putting them into a box. Do you conduct learning and development sessions on generations? And if you do, how is it presented? And this is going back to my story a moment ago. What are you saying and doing in that? The millennials are no different than the rest of us who do not fall into that category, and really lumping everyone into a category is profiling and could be discriminatory. So let's think about when we're doing generational training, what that looks like and sounds like moving forward. I often hear that the millennial epidemic is only in startups and tech. So working with these people is really only indicative to startups and tech. And I would have to call that a false assumption. Basically, this particular age group is taking over, and we need to embrace them and work with them and understand that not all millennials are created equal, just like you and I are not all created equal. If I were to stereotype or profile, I would say they tend to value strong relationships. They tend to want to be a part of the impact of what the workplace does. They're not only driven by money, whereas many in my age group, if we're stereotyping, are driven mostly by money. And yes, they do tend to be more comfortable with tech and social platforms. But is every millennial this way? No. By saying everyone is the same as the stereotype, I would be saying that because I'm gay, I must create the most fierce Halloween costume on the face of the earth. Or that because I'm gay that I must want to shop all the time. Okay, the second one is absolutely true, by the way. I do shop all the time. But we have to stand back and learn about the individuals. By the way, said this on a couple other podcasts, but I do my podcast from my closet in my master bedroom because the sound quality is so much better. And my friend Sean is the one who taught me that. But I'm literally sitting here next to this giant costume that I bought for a party. And going back to me saying that if you're gay, you must be fierce at making Halloween costumes. I am terrible at it. So I had to buy one. And I had to buy one that's really awful. And I'm sitting here staring at it. It's kind of making me laugh. Anyway, my point is, going back to our subject here, is we have to stop using millennial as a bad word. And really, we should stop using it altogether. I read an article in BBC Work Life, titled, "Should We Drop the Term Millennial?" One point that made that I appreciated very much, as a cohort between 1980 and 2000, the oldest millennials are pushing 40, but the youngest are still teens. Two very, very different groups, meaning this particular age range is quite broad and really not encompassing of everyone at all. So stepping back and thinking about that for a moment is huge. And no, they do not all eat avocado toast. In my research, that particular subject oddly came up a lot. I was very confused. I'm 48, no judgment, and I love avo toast. So again, I was a little bit confused. Let's also remember that the baby boomers were considered to be the me generation, and Gen X was labeled to be even more narcissistic than the boomers. So how is this so different than how we describe millennials? I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about this very subject, and he is in his 60s, and he was telling me that, yes, the way that his age range was described, or mine, is really no different, except that there's just different components in it now. We have the tech components, we have the social media platform components that we had, but back then, the younger generation was described as me, or it was described as narcissistic, or it was described as not helpful to the community. And I found that fascinating to have that conversation, and in my research, finding this exact same thing. I often hear that millennials are tired of not being heard, or that they are the less experienced group. We should view everyone in the workforce as a contributor. That's huge. Everyone in the workforce is a contributor. We don't need to care that they're a baby boomer, a Gen X, or a Gen Y, a Gen Z, any of these things. Millennials, we need to consider everyone as a workforce contributor, and everyone should be viewed as part of the team. And at no point should anyone be made to feel that they are not important or heard. If this is the case, you need to step back and determine if this particular company or culture is the right one for you. And that's okay to say. That's okay to think. Is this the place for me? Is the culture in which they stand for what works for me? I also find it fascinating that boomers and Xers were never really referred to in that manner. I never heard, well, they're a boomer, or it figures they're an Xer. So why do we chastise and make millennials so bad? Why have we pushed that one out just a little bit further and used the label against them all the time? I was at a coffee shop the other day and heard the barista, after the individual walked away, saying, "Typical millennial." And again, these things keep just taking me back, because I keep thinking, again, I don't recall any typical Gen X or typical boomer. We never did that. So why are we doing that now? Why should we use that word at all? I want to encourage everyone to step back and realize a few things from this podcast. 1, millennial is not a bad word. 2, millennials contribute to the workforce and are here to stay. They are not going anywhere. Embrace them. Help them to learn as someone helped us to learn. 3, stop putting millennials in a box or a stereotype. They are not all the same, and we are not all the same. 4, help to change the culture in your workplace with the above tips. The more you know, the more you will succeed. And the more you help others, the more they will succeed. It's a simple, simple concept. Also, if you're not heading poor behavior off at the pass, are you contributing to a bullying workplace mentality? Think about that for just a moment. If you are, go back to point number 4, to be the change agent for a more positive culture in the workplace. Okay. Off my soapbox. As we close, I want to remind you that you can always contact us at Tech People Resources for learning and development opportunities on any HR-related subject. Or you can always reach out to me at Houchin Consulting for HR assistance of any kind. We are here to help. Tune in next time to HR Chalk Talk as I meet up again with my co-founder, Dana Turner, and we're going to speak about the importance of documentation. You will not want to miss it. Please don't miss this insightful podcast and learn more on this subject. And remember, it's about respect. Your employees will thank you. Respect is an absolute must, especially when leading others. Thank you for joining me today, and have a great week.